Hello, I'm Mr. Rogers,
And I'm Mrs. Froman.
and you're watching the video lecture. Now we're jumping over Chapter 4 and going right to Chapter 5, so it's on
Yeah.
Section 5-1, on plants, and in particular seed plants. So seed plants are the biggest group. There's some that are called non-vascular, non-seed plants, but the vast majority of plants tend to have vascular tissue and are seed plants. And that's what we're going to focus on here today. So characteristics of seed plants. I kind of skipped my intro slide there, I guess. Yeah. So seed plants is a kingdom we're on, plants. So we've studied bacteria, fungi, protists, not animals yet, but we're on that plant kingdom. And we're on this seed plant is what we're going to focus on. And so they have vascular tissue. Vascular tissue, think about your own veins. They carry nutrients up and down, tubes that carry nutrients up and down. Then they use seeds to reproduce. They have those specialized structures. They have leaves, stems, and roots. And most live on land. Few aquatic ones, but most of them live on land.
So what is that vascular tissue
Yeah.
you were talking about? So if you look at that, there's a picture down there. There's thick walls of vascular tissue help to support the plant. So plants don't have bones or anything, so why are they standing upright? And it's those thick walls, and it helps hold the water in there and helps them stay up. So it's like a bunch of tubes, just like your veins, and it's a transport system, and it carries water and food, not FOD, to all parts of the plant.
And so there's two major types of vascular tissue. There's the phloem, transports food from the leaves to the stems. And I was thinking about phloem down. So phloem carries
phloem
food down. So phloem down. You have xylem. Xylem transports water and nutrients from the roots to the stems and leaves. So xylem's carrying the water where the roots are going to gather water. So xylem up, phloem down. Yeah, xylem up, phloem down. You can see here kind of the idea of how the xylem will carry the water nutrients up.
So another characteristic that seed plants have are they have seeds. And the seed is a structure that contains a young plant, and it's protected in a covering so it doesn't dry out and helps it survive so it gets to a new place to make a new plant. So they come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and
Kind of depends on how they're dispersed, right? There's a lot of the big part of it, how they've evolved.
Some of them have those little bristly things on them.
Yep. Some are, round, weird, different shapes. So those parts of a seed, you have an embryo. That's actually the baby plant inside with tiny leaves, roots, and stem. You have what's called a cotyledon, and that's the stored food that, before that plant breaks through the ground, it's going to use that food to kind of grow to get to the surface. It's also going to have a seed coat, and some are tougher than others, but it's that outer covering that protects the embryo and keeps it from drying out. That seed coat kind of covers the outside. And there's our three parts. And this is going to be one of those times where make sure you're actually listening. Put that picture in your notes. We're not going to put anything else on there. You should be listening and put that picture in your notes.
So we were talking about the seed dispersal. There's some major ways they can be dispersed. Animals. If animals eat them, then those ones that have little barbs on them get stuck in their fur.
Yeah, the birds, yep.
Yes. And those seeds get deposited in a new area when the animal takes the burr off or makes waste, I guess you
That's
could
right.
say.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
those seeds come out in the waste. Then there's water, where the seeds can float to a new area. So they're buoyant and they can go on the surface of water. Wind, everybody likes to play with those little helicopters that come from the box elder trees and stuff.
Or the dandelion.
And dandelions, So those can get blown to a new area, and then there is something called shooting, and those are seeds that they're like under pressure, and at the right time they just explode and pop, and those seeds go shooting off.
Is that a sesame plant? The open sesame comes from those
Yes,
actually
open
bursts?
sesame is one of them. Yes, balsam is one.
Okay. So again, lots of different ways that seeds are dispersed. There's not just one mechanism we would say for distributing seeds. There's a bunch, depending on how that plant has evolved and what other animals are around it in its ecosystem.
Right.
So what happens here, that seed's been dispersed, it finds the right spot, and certain hormones start to kick in and say, okay, now it's time to germinate. So germination occurs when that seed will absorb water that's around it, and that embryo is going to use the food from the cotyledon to start growing. So kind of that initial process of getting the seed to start growing. And so that root's going to grow down first, and then stem's going to grow up afterwards to start collecting light for photosynthesis. So you kind of see a basic animation. You get the root first, getting some offshoots going, and then it's going to break through those leaves, making the type of planting the cotyledon or dicotyledon, monocot or dicot, how many leaves it's going to have in the beginning, and start carrying out photosynthesis. So it's that process of starting to grow. Germination means when it starts to grow.
All right, then we have leaves. The leaves' job is to capture the energy from the sun, so it can make its food using photosynthesis. And the upper part of the leaf, if you've ever noticed a leaf, it seems like it's greener on the top than it is on the bottom, and that's because the chloroplasts are all up at the top of the leaf, since that's what's getting most of the sun. And there's kind of a cross-section of the chloroplast. So they are trapping that sunlight, so then it uses that energy to break down those water and carbon dioxide molecules to make sugar.
So inside these leaves, you're also going to have these veins that kind of that vascular tissue contains the xylem and the phloem. And that leaf, like you were saying, the lower part tends to be not where the photosynthesis is happening. So there's all your green chloroplasts, the cells, all the chloroplasts in there. And below that, some of the gases are stored in there. We have those stomata that can take in carbon dioxide and release the O2. So those gases, CO2 and O2, are kind of trapped down there on the bottom side of the leaf.
Then there's something called transpiration, and this happens a lot to plants, especially around here. You notice when it's really hot, the corn kind of curls its leaves in, and what's happening is it's a process by which that water evaporates from the leaves. So the water is actually leaving the leaves. A corn plant can lose 4 liters of water every day when it's really hot out. So to slow that, the plant closes its stomata. So then it doesn't let any of those water molecules out. The problem is it's also not letting any carbon dioxide in, so it's kind of at a standstill for doing photosynthesis.
All right. I've also heard that affects our weather. It actually can make it a few degrees hotter in the summertime with all the cornfields
with
around.
all that water.
So our next major kind of type or part of a plant would be a stem. And the stem carries substance between the roots and the leaves, provides that support, hold up the plant. The taller it goes, the stronger that support has to be. And there's 2 kind of different types of stems. There's called herbaceous stems. They're soft and flexible. They tend to regrow every year if it's an annual.
Yeah, like the flowers.
The flowers,
grasses.
The grass. They're going to regrow those every year. The woody stems are hard and rigid, and they tend to stick around and kind of expand upon year after year. They don't grow a new one every year. Nope, wrong way.
There we go. Woody stem structure. All right. So a woody stem would be those trees and shrubs. And that outside part is the bark, and that's mainly for protection. And then there's the inner bark, and that contains the phloem. So that's where the water's coming, bringing the food from the leaves down into the roots. Then there's a cambium layer, and that produces the new xylem and phloem. So that's what's making the tree get fatter every year. And then there's sapwood layer, and that's the active xylem. So that's where xylem's going up. And then the heartwood is the old xylem, so that's like retired xylem. It's not really functional anymore, but it's there for support. And the very inside of, like in the middle, is called the pith. And when the tree's young, it stores a lot of water.
So that doesn't have the root system yet, probably the biggest reason.
Right, yeah.
All right, guys, so what this creates then are those annual rings. That xylem and phloem, depending on how much rain there is, the light-colored rings are for the spring, probably lots of moisture then, and darker-colored rings are in the summer in the xylem, so you get kind of this pattern. And the wider the rings, the more rain that area received that year. So you actually get a record of the amount of rain based on these rings, and they've done that for some older trees. Some of these pine trees out in the west are hundreds, if not thousands of years old. They have a record going back thousands of years of what the weather was like.
Then we have roots, and the root's job is to anchor that plant in the ground. And it also is absorbing the water and nutrients from the soil, sending it up to the stem so it can take it to the leaves. There's 2 kinds of roots. There's the tap root, and that would be like a dandelion. It has a really long, strong
Just go straight
root.
down.
And then it has little roots branching off of that. Now, a fibrous root has a whole bunch of roots, so that's like grass. If you try to pull grass out of your garden, it just comes in a big glob. So that's the fibrous root system.
And what the prairie used to be here in Illinois, these grasses, so it's very tough to plow under.
Yeah, and a lot of in the grasses, the prairie grasses, some of those go down 5 feet, so it's
very
a little
tough
hard to yank out.
All right, then finally, guys, down at the bottom of the root here, bottom of our plant, we have the root structure. So we have that root cap. The root cap is kind of a tougher end of like dead cells. So as it grows, it's not going to damage the roots. It's going to have a root cap down there at the end. And right behind that root cap, you have these dividing cells right here behind it. And that's where it's going to actually start to lengthen and cause it to grow. So as it grows, you have that kind of tough end at the end of the root to help protect it as it's expanding and growing in the soil. And so what happens here, phloem brings food to the root, and xylem brings it up to the root, just like other parts of the plant. And also in the roots there is cambium that produces that new xylem and phloem. So actually the cambium layer inside the root as it grows. You can see that here inside. So 7th grade, we're going to stop there. We thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you along the way.
Bye.